Alright, hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty big game. It's Diablo 4. And that's because I have always been sort of following the Diablo franchise. I waited a little bit behind Diablo 4. I've purchased it, I've completed it, I have leveled a Necromancer to level 72. And while I'm definitely not the best player out there, I feel like I have a good enough understanding to talk some basics about the game. And while not going in super deep depth, like I'm not gonna do an Asmongold thing where I talk about every little niche issue with the game. I am gonna more focus on the bigger picture, which I think is fairly positive so far in terms of Diablo's content and how it sort of does. And in addition to that, we are obviously a couple of weeks in, which also gives some hindsight as to how well the content in the game lasts over time. And that's something that I think is very important in these games, especially since it's gonna be a live service. It's gonna be something with multiple seasons. The first season is gonna start, as far as I know, in somewhere mid this month of July. So there you go. And that's really why I wanted to talk about it before the season launches, so we can sort of have a perspective of how the current content holds up and what hopefully the seasons will refresh and what they want. So let's get straight into it. So Diablo 4 is very much so your new standard for ARPGs, in the sense that Diablo 4 has a dodge mechanic. It has all of those cool things in addition to the old, hack and slash, find more loot and just slap everything with bone spear because you're a necromancer and you have an insane amount of crit. So turn about the bad things first, because there aren't a lot, and I honestly think the ones that I'm gonna be bringing up are sort of nitpicky. So let's just go with it to begin with. So to begin with, and this is purely a necromancer thing, but minions are pretty ass. You need some very specific items, as far as I understand, to really make a minion build viable on a necromancer, which is sort of weird when that's the entire reason you play necromancer. It's for necromancy, which in Diablo 4 right now is not really the best go-to option. And that's a bit of a shame, because it is a really fun playstyle and whatnot, but as I said, it's nothing really huge at all. Other than that, pathfinding is abhorrent, honestly. It doesn't use smart pathfinding, it uses the same pathfinder you'd see in a game like the older Diablos, like Diablo 2 and 3, where you press somewhere and your character directly goes in a line over there. And the same thing happens on a mount and so on. And whether or not you like that, that's a taste thing. Personally, I would prefer the smart pathfinder where I can just click at some point in the city and my character will find his way up there himself. So there isn't any running into a wall or whatever. But you know what, it is what it is, and it's nothing huge, as I said. So that's pretty much all the bad things I have to say about Diablo 4. Let's move into the positive. First off, Diablo 4's story is fantastic. It's not a big surprise. Blizzard can make pretty cutscenes, and Diablo 4 is no exception. Some of the cutscenes in Diablo 4 are stunning. Just like absolutely stunning. They're super pretty, they're well rendered, they make sense within the wider plot, and the story overall is just fairly good. So honestly, pretty good job on that. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think you should experience it for yourself. Now, for what for most of us is more important is like the content and what you are doing and how it feels. So, in Diablo 4 it's an ARPG, so you'll be chasing down items, stats, and different stats on different items. And that's gonna be the majority of the entirety of the game, since it is an ARPG in the vein of Diablo 3, 2, and 1, Path of Exile, and so on. I feel like everybody has an idea of what an ARPG is by this point. You have multiple ways of obtaining that loot. However, you can do public events, which reward public event currency, which can be used to focus in on specific items. So, as an example, weapons or whatever, like rings or helmets or chest plates and so on, right? And other than that, you have world bosses. World bosses are honestly, in my opinion, at the moment, the coolest visually content in the game. And that is until I get slightly higher in level, where it'll just be 15 seconds and then they're dead. But right now in the level 70s, where they exist for more than like 5 seconds, I think they're pretty cool. Partially because they're these huge bosses with AoE moves that you constantly have to like move around and dodge and be very smart with how you play it. And partially because the rewards are alright for them. I would say, in general, and that is across the entirety of Diablo, you could buff all loot drops. But especially from the world bosses, they feel mildly underwhelming, as usually they give 1 or 2 uniques, or well, not uniques, legendaries, with a chance of a unique, and only one world boss has a specific world boss drop, which I think is weird. Give everyone some cosmetic to chase. Like, every world boss should, in my opinion, have a cosmetic to chase. And right now they don't, and I think that's a pretty unfortunate situation for them. There are 4 different world bosses. They each have a spawn timer of 5 hours, meaning that there can only be 1 at a time. So 1 every 5 hours, real hours, mind you, it's not like in-game time. For me, that means that the one I usually kill is at 1:30 a.m. And that's obviously super late. And it's an annoying system. They could buff the timer as well slightly. I get that they want them to be these huge events though, so I sort of understand why they're doing it like they are. However, I will say, personally, I find them to be overall, despite some of the issues I've listed here when it comes to world bosses, I think they're super cool. And I think they're pretty damn just awesome to look at. Like, visually, they are there. The effects in the like combat arena are all over the place, and that's exactly how it should be. I think that's overall pretty positive as well. Now, when you have talked about world bosses, it's important to also mention the Hell Tide. The Hell Tide is your, how do you even put it? It is your big zone that essentially turns red. There's a bunch of demons, and now you can go in and farm a specific currency in there that you use to unlock chests. There are usually these giant pops of like groups of ads that you just mow through, then you pick up the currency, which when you have enough of them, you can go and turn them in at a chest to give you a more focused item. That can again be rings, two-handed weapons, and so on. However, the main issue with Helltide at the moment is that from the chests, the chances to get legendary seems to be fairly low in comparison to how much it costs and how long it takes to run a Helltide. And the thing is, it's not that it isn't fun, because Helltide is legitimately one of the more fun activities in my opinion, as it's super brain dead. You just don't focus at all and you just run around. In my case, I'm a Bone Spear Necromancer, so I just throw my Bone Spear everywhere. I watch the big crits, and that's pretty much the loop. And that's the thing really with Helltide. It's super brain dead. However, there are materials you can only get from Helltide that you need to upgrade your weapons. So you need to play Helltide at some times. It's just, Helltide overall at the moment isn't what I consider the best experience. It's a nice relaxing experience, but it's probably not where it should be overall. And with that I mean, it would be nice to see some more unique stuff happening within Helltide. Like, what if more than just the one? Right now there's one unique boss, but what if there was like multiple unique bosses that would wander around Helltide? How about like making some specific Helltide events, like more of them and so on? Like, you can do a lot of things that improve Helltide. And I think these are like just some examples of what could be done, but I think a huge one would be to buff the direct reward from it, because right now Helltides are unrewarding. And it's a bit unfortunate, but I honestly think they'll probably end up increasing the sheer amount of loot you get from them. That also means we move on to the next piece of content you'll be spending a lot of your time with. Alright, when we're talking Diablo 4, it's also important to mention what is probably gonna be your most played piece of content in the game. And that's the Nightmare Dungeons. The Nightmare Dungeons is essentially Diablo 4's answer to Diablo 3's Rifts, or Path of Exile's maps. It is essentially a system where you can have any one of the dungeons, being that it's completely randomized. You can have any one of them being selected to be the Nightmare Dungeon. When it's the Nightmare Dungeon, you have this little item you click on and it activates it. It gives it different modifiers, kinda akin to a map in Path of Exile. Some of them are creative, some of them aren't. As an example, one of my personal, I'd say, favorites is a modifier that creates this guardian stone behind you that if you don't move, it'll come over to you and explode, dealing some AoE damage. It's pretty cool. I really think it's sort of neat as a concept, and they do it fairly well, I'd say. And I think that's fairly cool. There are also others less creative, such as you take increased poison damage, or any of those. You name it, it probably has it. There's also positive modifiers that you get all the time. There's at least one, and it is currently one of my favorites, is the crit modifier that just increases crit chance. That is because I am playing a Bonespear Necromancer. However, the main issue with Nightmare Dungeons is with a lot of the other parts of the game, they feel sort of unrewarding. There's this huge being bathed in loot. You just get 2 pieces for completing it and some XP. The XP is fairly high right now, but there's still people who are just slaying mobs to level instead. And I think that's sort of a shame because the Nightmare Dungeon system is fairly good. I, however, do believe and can definitely see why some people would prefer the other, just slay mobs, as it's safer and faster, especially if you're on hardcore. However, that being said, Nightmare Dungeons are pretty fun. They are definitely diverse, being that there's a million of them. I think there's 150 or something like that. However, I would like to see more modifiers and more rewards for actually completing them, specifically within the loot department. There's also, and obviously that also has to be mentioned, the Tree of Whispers, or Whiskers, as I've been hearing. And the Tree of Whispers is another progression system where you have a bar you fill up. You can see the bar when you're hovering over the tree, and you essentially just go around and complete a couple of objectives on the map. It fills up. Once it's full, you can buy a crate. There is a chance for that crate to be a legendary variant. If it's a legendary variant of the crate, you get slightly better rewards as far as I know. And that sums up all the content in Diablo 4. It also has to be mentioned that there is a PvP system, but it's an arpg and I'm not sure how many people will buy it just for the PvP. But this is anyway the major ones. So, having talked about all the technical and gameplay related stuff, let's just gorge a little bit of the, beautiful nature of the game, the music and the vibes it has. So let's do that as next. Now, obviously Diablo 4 is a top-down game. However, that does not mean it's an ugly top-down game. Diablo 4 sometimes is completely visually stunning in that really disgusting way only Diablo manages to be. In the way where you're running through an entire labyrinth of guts and or people's arms sticking out of walls and so on. You can also do some pretty wild things with the character customizer and or, the appearance modifiers through for your armor and stuff. Unfortunately, most of the cosmetics are locked behind the cash shop, which is unfortunately a thing and a $70 a game. And to add insult to injury, I think Diablo 4 is fairly good in terms of fashion. You have a lot of fashion options, just a lot of them are locked behind the paywall, and I think that's a pretty big shame. I also think that, unfortunately, the entire visual department of Diablo 4 sort of lacks the creativity I feel like 3 had. And I know that's just me, and I know a lot of people prefer Diablo 4. I just miss the cartoony style that Diablo 3 had a little bit, because it was way more unique. I don't really see it anywhere. The only place I could go to get that style would be Torchlight Frontiers, but that is a microtransaction gacha game system hell, so I prefer not to play it. And at that point, Diablo 3 was really the only thing I had when that type of graphics, other than the old Torchlight games. And it's sort of a shame to see it go, but I definitely understand why they went with the more realistic and hard-hitting graphical style that they did. It's not that it's bad, and it fits perfectly into the world, and especially when we get to the music design, it will make so much sense. So, speaking of music design, let's get right to it. I think Diablo 4's sound design is some of the best in any ARPG out there, just period. It is overall extremely solid. It manages to not just have fantastic boss scores, but also just in general sound really appealing. I'll play a little bit of just the general wandering music around right now from one of the areas. I'm not gonna spoil which one or anything, but I'm just gonna play you some music from the game and just tell me how you like it. What do you think? To me, I think it perfectly sort of seals the deal. It sort of puts the final layer on the world that it needs, and I honestly think it does it really well. And at the end of the day, it gives this like really nice medieval, really uniquely Diablo vibe. It reminds me a lot of Diablo 2, which I think was the entire point, and I think if that's the case, it did it extremely well. That being said, I think that's all I have to say. I think Diablo 4 is a really good game that you definitely should try, especially if you like ARPGs. However, I fully understand that $70 is a lot to ask for any game. I also think it's worth noting that every seasonal start you have to start over with your character in case you didn't know. And that's definitely a thing that I know some people are a little burnt by, but you know, it's a thing. And honestly, I'd say if it's a good game and they add a lot throughout the seasons, I wouldn't mind leveling. However, if it's just the same thing done over and over, I am probably not gonna play more than one season. However, that's been it for me, and I will catch you all in the next video, which, by the way, is gonna be about Remnant from the Ashes, so that's something to look forward to.